friends. I know you're nominated for Juno for Comedy Album of the Year. What's that like? Could you talk more about that moment when you found out you were nominated? Because that's a
Yes.
big moment for you.
Yeah, really. Thank you so much. It's so funny because, I submitted my album for it, just like many people do in the hopes of being nominated. And then so how they do it, how they work it is that on behalf of the Junos, a promotional company will call, it was like a PR company called Rocket, and I got a call on my phone and it said like Rocket promo, and I didn't really know what that was. And for a split second I thought, because I answered and they said, hello, is this Jackie? And it's so weird for somebody to call me unsolicited and call me Jackie, because like if it's a telemarketer, it would be Jacqueline
Yeah.
if they have like my info. And so I'm like, yes. And then for one split second, I thought it was like a radio station, like Boom FM or something, calling me to like do an on-air quiz that maybe I could win $1,000, guess the famous voice or something. So my heart started racing at the thought of that. So then when I heard, then when I heard, um, you've been you're invited to attend the Juno nomination announcement ceremony. All I heard was Juno. And I was like, oh, am I nominated? Am I nominated? And they were like, we cannot legally tell you anyone who's nominated, but you are invited, just saying, to come to the nomination ceremony announcement, which was like in a couple of weeks from then at CBC. So I was like, okay, okay. So then I spent the next 2 weeks thinking, would they invite me if I wasn't nominated? Surely not, right? And I was like talking to my mom and my husband, that would be cruel, right? They wouldn't do that, right? I was like, if they did that, that would be like the cruelest, almost like Carrie style, like prank. So I spent 2 weeks wondering and not telling anyone in case it was either I hallucinated the call or
I mean, you
whatever.
might have. You never know.
Yeah, you know what? I've hallucinated different crazier stuff. And so and so finally the day came and I went to the CBC. Oh my God, this is, a real event. And then they announced it over these really nice, it was kind of a glitzy event, and they announced it on with these videos, and there was MCs in between. And so I didn't believe it until I heard my name for real in real life. And then in that moment, I was just like, and ever since then, and that was like on January 29th, I've been walking on a cloud.
As you should. It's a big accomplishment.
Thank you.
But I mean, the Junos are fast approaching. What are your plans for them? Are you going to the event? Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I'm flying to Edmonton. So it's in Edmonton this year, Edmonton, Alberta. I'm flying on Thursday, and it's kind of an action-packed, um, 5 or several days. So I get it on the Thursday. Then on the Friday, there's a comedy show put on by SiriusXM at this really beautiful brand new theater called Rapid Fire Theater. So there's two back-to-back shows, like a 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. So doing that on the like Friday night, and then the Saturday is the opening ceremony event, which is where the comedy category is being announced. So it's not like the main broadcast one, which is on the following Monday. But I've heard from inside sources, because I was like, oh, they put the kind of nobody comedians in, like not on the broadcasted one. But someone told me who I know whose husband has attended the Junos several times, is that opening ceremony is actually a bit fancier because it's like a
It
gala
is.
dinner. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Because it's like a supper and you sit down and it's kind of more of a gala style rather than the broadcast, which is like in the stadium, which I'm also going to and very excited too. But there's a couple red carpets like before each. And so yeah, my plan is to just be a bit glam finally for once. We don't have any chances to be glam, right? All
Yeah.
of our dresses are hanging in our closets collecting dust all the time. So I'm going to get a little bit of hair and makeup and be a little bit glam and just have a blast. And the other nominees I'm going with are so much fun. Like they're all such a fun group of people. So I'm just excited to get glam with them and goof off and like look at all the celebs and watch Nickelback get inducted into the
Yeah.
Canadian Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So yeah, it's action packed week.
Well, have you thought about your outfit? Because obviously you said you're going for glam. Do you have a dress or a suit? Like, what's going on there? Could you talk more about it?
Oh, Gracie, I could talk about this all day. I love this question because I actually am a thrift addict, and I know that's quite commonplace these days. I know that it's a big thing like on TikTok thrifting, but I've been doing it my whole life. And so
Yeah.
I have this big collection of like 90s dresses. And so I do have two looks planned. One
Okay.
for the opening ceremony, one for the broadcast. And the first one is kind of like a long do you remember Smart Set?
Yes.
Yes. So Smart Set is no longer, it does not exist, but it was a Canadian brand. I think they're kind of affiliated with Reitmans, but anyway, it doesn't sound very glam, but they had their moment. They had their moment in the 90s where they did actually have more dressy stuff like Le Chateau kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
so I've got this like long velour or velvet, like eggplant purple kind of not a gown, but like a long maxi dress with an empire waist, very 90s, kind
Okay.
of decadent, shiny, kind of whimsigoth, witchy kind of thing.
Okay.
Um, yeah, you're like, all right, I could picture it.
No, I
And
actually like when I heard that you were going for like an old school kind of look, I was like, it's gotta be purple. It's gotta be that egg
yes,
purple.
you're so good. Yes, good instincts. It is. I that's my favorite. And then for the second look, I'm another 90s, bit shorter, bit more fun and flirty, beaded black, like classic little black dress. But the beads are kind of give it a little bit of like sparkle, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
I
excited
love
to
talking
see
fashion with a
pictures of
gal.
them. Like, send me the pictures. Let's go.
You know what? I have to let you know exactly what's going on. I will send you those pictures, and I've promised quite a few other girls that I have to send them these pictures, so I'll do it all at
You have a
once.
long list of people who want to see it.
Yeah, my mom, my gal pals.
Yeah, you gotta get everyone in.
Yeah.
But I want to talk more about your album because obviously it's what you're nominated for. What was the creative process like behind that? Because there's so many things that go into an album as a whole, as opposed to like just singles or things like that.
Yeah. So the process from beginning to end is there's a lot of steps, and some of them are more mentally taxing than others. But since I recorded my first album back in 2019 and released it in 2019. So it's the new one, Splash Pad. Um, the current one is basically a accumulation of or a culmination of all the material that I've gathered since, kind of burning the other material on that first album. And a lot of that was worked on and workshopped kind of like just before and then during and right after the pandemic. So there's a lot of stuff in there about kind of reflective stuff about stand-up comedy itself.
Mhm.
Because after taking a step back and during lockdowns and not performing live, I was performing on Zoom, but not live in front of an audience.
Yeah, Zoom is
Uh,
different.
yeah, very, very different. So it was a time of reflection of like, man, stand-up comedy is so weird. It's such a weird thing to want to do. It's such a crazy kind of fool's errand thing. Like it's the most vulnerable, in my opinion, form of art because you're all alone. Ideas that materialized out of the ether, out of your brain. Like it's not something physical, it's not tangible, it's not as slightly objective as like maybe a beautiful song or a painting, which also is subjective, but I feel less so. So some of the material on my album is kind of about like, what the hell is this?
Fair
What
enough.
is this comedy? And then also some hypochondria stuff. It's more of like, I think it's a bit more of a reflective collection of material because of just that time to kind of sit around and think about me and myself and my art and that kind of thing. And also some personal family stories that I've gotten better at telling over the years that are deranged about my insane kind of dad. And he's kind of becoming a big hit character in my stand-up. So it's kind of a mixed bag of that. So the process goes from like, what material do I want to lay down on this, to the live recordings, which took place over two consecutive nights in April of 2022, which wasn't like it was out of lockdown, but the capacity limits weren't up fully. So I'm
Yeah.
really lucky to have had such a nice sound and like a nice crowd of laughing people to make up for the fact that it could only be like 40 people instead of like 60. So
Yeah.
that's nice. And then after that, because I'm not with a label, like there's a few comedy labels um in the city that are great, like Howl and Roar and like Comedy Records, but I'm a kind of a rogue sort of mercenary, like I'm off the leash. I'm like on like
Yeah.
independent. And so that means that like I worked with my wonderful sound engineer whose name is Jeremy Mercero, but just it was just the two of us and me kind of listening to all of those raw tracks for like months on end, kind of editing, okay, cut this one here in this order, and like even cutting out some kind of like and like kind of things
Yeah.
like that. And that drives you insane. Like it drives me insane because then you start, your perception of your own material starts getting warped and you're like, is this funny or is this psycho? Like it's
Yeah.
hard.
I get that.
Yeah, you lose sense of it. It kind of like a magic eye painting where you're too close and you kind of got to step back. And so that's the most harrowing process. And then after once that's done, just kind of getting it distributed through the channels of and submitting it to SiriusXM and that kind of thing. And then the fun part, well, it's all kind of fun, but then the fun part too is like the art, working with like a graphic designer to like have my concept realized because I cannot do anything like that myself. So I worked with this wonderful artist and direct. She's like a director. She's um like a creative director and a graphic and visual artist named Ann Doris, who did my artwork. And then you put it out to the world and you go, oh, please like it.
Yeah. And I mean, it did well. It got you a Juno nomination. So
Yes.
obviously you did something right.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the holding in the of the breath and the crossing of the fingers did it took and it
That's what did
worked.
it. It was that exactly.
Yes. Yeah, so that it's a long process from start to finish, but then yeah, at the end of the day, even with my first one that I did submit my first for a Juno nom, but and it didn't get considered, but even then like all the hard work pays off no matter what in some way or another, just to have your material out there in posterity in the world. So it's a good feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if you could describe yourself and your art in 3 words, what would they be?
Oh, that's great. I would say hyper realistic.
Okay.
I guess that's kind of 2 words mashed together because I'm cheeky and I'm cheating.
Okay, we'll give it to you.
Hyper realistic, but yet relatable. And maybe if I could put it into a one really long word, I'd say Willy Wonka's haunted boat ride.
Okay, oddly specific.
Do you remember that scene in Willy Wonka when they're on that boat ride and it's like, yeah, and it's scary and weird and there's like images coming out? I think
Yeah.
my style is kind of so cartoonish in a way, and I think it subverts expectations so you don't know where it's going to go next. That was
Okay.
a lot of words. And also know what? Here's a fourth word.
Okay.
Wordy.
Or, yeah, I mean, it has to be sometimes. But
I've got a lot of like a word per minute. I'm up there with my gift of gab.
I mean, at least they were all unique words. So it
Thank
wasn't
you.
like you were
Yes.
just saying the same 3 words over and over.
That's true. I will take that. Yes.
But my last question for you, I know you've got a lot of exciting stuff going on right now with the awards coming up and obviously your nomination, but do you have any future projects that you could hint at or talk about?
Yes, yeah. Something that's coming out very soon. I you know what, I think it's going to be out in the beginning of April. Is last spring I recorded a set for CBC's The New Wave of Comedy, which was a really fun taping. It's going to air on CBC Gem. It was part of the JFL Northwest, like just for Laughs Vancouver. Super fun. So that's going to come out soon. But it's so weird because like with any kind of TV taping, it happened so long ago in the past. And
Mhm.
so it's coming out. I'm like, what did I say again on that?
Do you even remember
So
anything that went on during that filming? Or you're like, I'm excited to watch this.
yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm gonna also be watching it like anyone else, like with new fresh eyes, because it feels like so much has happened since then. But it was a really fun taping, and Counterfeit Productions did that in conjunction with Just for Laughs, and it looked beautiful. It's at a very cool bar in Vancouver, so I'm really excited for that whole thing. And another thing I've got in the hopper is me and my friend and colleague and comedy kind of collaborator Mark Little, who's a veteran Canadian comedian from Picnic Face, and he had a lot of projects on the go. We've got a podcast coming out called How Can We Help? And we try and give advice to people who write in with life questions and who are seeking advice with any kind of facet of their interpersonal, family, career, that kind of thing. And we give, well, I don't know if it's good advice, but it certainly
You
is.
give
It can be called advice. Yeah.
Yeah. It comes
And
under that
it's fun.
category.
Yes. And we have guests on, comedians and artists from, in Canada and Toronto and Vancouver. Yeah. And it's just kind of a crazy, silly, fun pod released any minute now. Sometimes people are like, when is this coming out? Does this exist? Are you guys imagining this? I got a guest yesterday, my friend Tom Henry, and he was like, I checked to see if the mics were plugged in before we did this because this thing has been coming out for so long, but it's finally here. Because him and I are busy, so things get in the way, but that's coming out in like the next couple weeks.
Okay, well,
yes, so stay tuned for that.
Congratulations on everything you've been doing, and thank you so much for your time again.
Thank you. It's so fun.